Rebecca, the email you sent out was different tonight because normally there's a number that I paste in on mine, and maybe everybody else is just clicking on the link or something.
No, what
I mean,
happened was here in the building, I tried to send out the link as normal, and when I clicked send, the outbox just sent infinitely. And I realized that that would mean that no one would show up on time, so I stopped and I typed it all out on my iPad by hand and sent it via a different server so that it would get through on time. So I didn't take the time to copy every single bit that I usually just cut and paste. So I was hoping that everyone would figure it out. And if you don't know, the digits at the end of is the meeting ID. But I figured everyone is super smart and super cool and was going to figure that out. So everybody made it here. Noelle says, I always use the link and it works, and that is good. All right, fantastic. Okay, so I'm getting going on my recording in the background. Wonderful. Tonight's topic, we are talking about cannabis and DMT. And you know something? I have some drawings up here, and I'll be sure to enlarge them so that you can see them better. I use this drawing a lot, this painting that I've done of the third eye and the lens-like effect that it has in front of the face, and also its connection to the pineal gland, because this is what we're talking all about tonight. This is all about really the importance of the pineal gland. So it must be understood, like I've spoken about that in conjunction with higher consciousness, insight, Christ consciousness. Tonight we're going to speak about it in a very biological sense and also in a molecular sense, or almost in the sense of chemistry. Why have I chosen DMT and cannabis specifically as two chemicals to speak about? I mean, certainly there are all sorts of different, we could call them entheogens is a good word, but they are molecules that humans can take in order to have an experience of higher consciousness or of a spiritual realm. And I have chosen to focus on these two topics, these two particular molecules, because they are endogenous brain chemicals. So endogenous means they are naturally occurring. If you cut open your brain and took microscopic samples out of there from the right places, you would find tiny little amounts of DMT and tiny little amounts of cannabis, or the cannabinoids, that are part of your body's own system. So in lesson 17, the recorded homework, I go into this in detail, and I will be happy to also speak about it here in detail, but I don't want to be boring and reiterate. And what we're really talking about here is the molecules that are these, we could call them neurotransmitters or hormones. I don't want to get too specific about exactly how we define them, but these tiny little naturally occurring substances are chemical doorways to another realm. All right, this is pretty important in understanding that there is a connection between the biology and what is happening in the biological system and in the neurology and one's perception of reality. Holy crow, that's a pretty amazing thing. You mean if I eat or drink the right thing, it changes my perception of reality? Yes, my friends, if you eat or drink the right thing, it changes sometimes radically one's perception of reality. So of these two chemicals, one is radically changes your and shifts your perception of reality. That's DMT. So the short, synopsis about DMT, it is the short acronym for dimethyltryptamine, and tryptamines come from L-tryptophan, which is a substance in food. It's in a lot of food. It is what we blame the post-Thanksgiving-itis on. You know, if you ever, after a Thanksgiving meal, feel like you just need to lay down on the couch, unbutton your belt buckle, and just settle in and digest, that can often be attributed to tryptophan and also an aversion to having to wash the dishes. However, if you take that tryptophan and you subject it to two tiny little chemical do-si-dos, you get dimethyltryptamine. Pretty amazing. And that stuff, if you ingest it, will make you perceive higher reality. So it has been used by shamans in the Amazon for many ages. These amazing shaman have found a recipe for the chemical brew. So there are some students of this class who have shared their experiences of drinking the chemical brew with us, and they're not here tonight, but I will synopsize that basically one must follow a dieta, or a purifying fast, that it's not that you eat nothing, but for a period of several weeks before one has the experience, it is necessary to clear out the digestive tract. And that is because certain foods inhibit the proper absorption of the chemicals that are in DMT. When they make it in the Amazon, they make a blending of 3 different herbs. And one of those herbs is a MAO inhibitor. MAO is mono amide oxidase. I'm sorry if I didn't say that completely correctly, but it is a brain enzyme, and MAO inhibitors inhibit that brain enzyme, and certain substances such as aged and pickled cheeses and other like pickled type of fermented foods inhibit the MAO inhibitor. So if it's like saying, if you are trying to fill your sink with water, but you're eating something that is taking the water out of the sink, it is antithetical to what you're trying to do. So certain foods one must avoid for the dieta, and also avoid caffeine and nicotine. Hey, do you hear anything that sounds similar on those substances? Caffeine, nicotine, tryptamine. These are all substances that affect the brain, and in order to make the DMT work at its most powerful possible levels, it is necessary not to ingest the other chemicals that would have an inhibitory effect. So now we're beginning to understand some of the complexity of the molecular landscape of your brain. And the brain is not equal to the mind. The mind and consciousness experience many levels of reality, and the brain is just the corporeal anchor in this reality. We'll get into that also when we talk about the pineal gland, because the pineal gland is the origin of DMT inside of your brain. So this is pretty amazing, because you have a tiny little magical gland. Let me bring this into focus here. Here's your tiny little magical gland right in here. Oops, sorry, wrong one. Right over here. There we go. Directly at the center of your brain. That is where DMT is emitted from your own brain. So the substance exists not only as a blending of several plants in the Amazon, it also exists within your brain. And it exists at key, crucial times in your life. The time when your consciousness enters your body, when you're a tiny little fetus in your mother's womb, and when consciousness exits your body, usually upon corporeal death, but can sometimes be upon a near-death experience or an otherwise intense spiritual experience. Having ingesting DMT artificially, like you can either do it through smoking it or through making this brew and drinking it, or it can even be administered in, a laboratory setting. They have purified it to be able to be administered intravenously, okay? So if you take it from an external source, DMT will give you the experience that you would have naturally upon exiting your body. So we're talking about the experience of exploring otherworldly dimensions, where you go when you are no longer anchored here and stuck here by your corporeal body. If you are not yet aware of the work of Dr. Rick Strassman, highly, highly, highly recommend. It's on YouTube, it's on Netflix. It's called DMT, the Spirit Molecule. This is an excellent scholarly work. It's both a book and it has been created into a documentary, which is both entertaining and really informative. And it will give you a lot of the information I'm giving you and 10 million times more specific information about DMT. And people share their specific experiences. The amazing thing is that when people go to another realm under the influence of DMT, they often have experiences that I would say we would mirror consensual reality in the sense that two people might go and have an experience and see the same thing. Or if many people, like oftentimes people will ingest DMT together, like as a group experience, many times they will all experience the same hyperdimensional reality. And, you know, so for example, if one person perceives a python, you know, coming out of someone's mouth, and then afterwards they compare experiences and everybody saw that, that's a pretty powerful experience. So we're talking about the type of thing that is, it makes one question our definition of hard-edged reality when we begin to experience consensual reality that is the end result, or that is it has been incepted by the ingestion of a particular molecule. So DMT is released when you come into the body and when you exit the body. And if you take it when you are not in a dire medical crisis, you have the opportunity to leave the physical realm for a brief amount of time and have all sorts of experiences and communications. So DMT used to be called the businessman's trip. I love this because instead of, you know, LSD, oh, I don't have 18 hours or 24 hours to book for a whole LSD trip. The beautiful thing about DMT is that it takes a very short amount of time. You can experience in a 29-minute trip the entire journey that you would experience over an 18-hour or 24-hour LSD voyage. And so that's why it was the businessman, that you could step out on your lunch break, ingest some DMT, and then come back to reality and go back to work. However, of course, according to the experience of the member of this class who shared a lot with me, that is not the way one ingests DMT shamanistically. And it also must be understood that DMT is contained in ayahuasca. Ayahuasca, the brew itself, is like a consciousness. It's like an entity. Many people have spoken about meeting the entity ayahuasca and sensing that it was almost like an uncle, like an avuncular presence. And the description was the type of uncle who would set you right on your path, who wouldn't take a bunch of BS from you, okay? That these plant teachers are meant to be not recreational disco drugs, but really stern teachers. And other people have reported their experiences of taking ayahuasca and some of these other South American vines that have an entity attached to them, like ibogaine is another one, where the entity and consciousness contained within the vine itself seemed to be, if not judgmental, critical about a person's ego and life choices. That if you take ayahuasca or some of these other, you know, shamanistically applied entheogens, one must be prepared to be under the microscope, and under the microscope in the mirror also, because you are the one who is microanalyzing yourself, and to be prepared to let go of what no longer serves. That's what it is. And the experience of ingesting the DMT ayahuasca brew orally, first you must, you know, prepare yourself, and then you drink this very bitter plant sap, and then purging is part of it. So usually there is a period of experience. I did not say hallucination. Do you know why? Our collective reality is a freaking hallucination, okay? We are hallucinating right now. You're hallucinating that you're seeing me on a computer. We're just all in agreement about this particular hallucination, okay? So when you ingest the ayahuasca and you're perceiving this otherworldly reality, and then after many hours, it is considered to be a part of the journey to purge, and the purge is not only vomiting, but it's also from the other end. And think about this. Your gut bacteria have intelligence and they perceive experiences. So there's a good teacher that I would say you might be interested in looking into their work, a woman named Alea Dow, and she is also a walk-in, and she talks about reprogramming from negative traumas by sending light and healing and a matrix of light and healing to one's gut bacteria. Because think about this. Those individuated bacteria that are riding along with you in your small intestine and your colon are having all the same experiences you are. Like if you go to work and your boss dresses you down and speaks badly to you and you end up feeling really bad, that experience is felt by your gut bacteria, because you probably will get a stomach ache and be like, oh, I don't feel so good, I don't want to eat, a nice lovely meal. Any emotional experience is remembered by one's gut bacteria, and that the purging and cleansing that one experiences through vomiting and diarrhea has a lot to do with releasing those heavier, denser emotions. So in this case, ayahuasca can be a plant teacher that shows one the flaws or weak points of the persona and helps one to release the stored emotional energy that is preventing the frictionless movement through time of the perception. That when you release those things that you're throwing up and purging out, it means your mind can now travel with less friction, with fewer obstacles. And the obstacles are emotions, bad things that happen to you, that got stuck inside, that need to come out. So DMT can be a very effective plant teacher. This is a similar experience of rebirth to what I would call having a sun bath. So this is a little bit of a tangent. It's not specifically about DMT, but it is a similar sense of being reborn, that one can send one's consciousness into the sun or send another being's consciousness into the sun, where whatever is not the real you is bathed away. And the idea of ritual purification actually goes back to the Torah and the initial prescriptions that were given to the people who lived in the desert and became the Israelites and the Jewish people. The idea of the mikvah, to wash away things that trouble you, that you may become new again, which then turned into the idea of baptism. So this is the whole concept that you can die within your corporeal life. Because you know something? Sometimes bad things happen that one wishes to close a chapter on and that one needs renewal from. Or even if something is not bad, sometimes it is merely the end. Like if you think about a beautiful garden, some years my garden in Woodstock was absolutely amazing and so brilliant. And then there would always be that period of lying fallow, where no matter how brilliant the sunflowers were, everything dies down and there's a time of nothing happening, so that then things can happen anew. And that all of that is very appropriate. So it doesn't have to be that one has experienced something traumatic. You might simply wish to begin a new chapter, or like I, as an artist, sometimes wish to begin a new painting. And whatever I might have done on other canvases does not have to inhibit or create limitations on my future canvases moving forward. And this is like a very healthy thing to have. So the idea that you can be renewed within your lifetime. Sweat Lodge or Inipi Lodge does this. Taking ayahuasca as an entheogen under shamanistic tutelage does this. And there's other things I'm sure that we can talk about, different ways of personal renewal. But I bring this up because DMT can be a pathway towards personal renewal. Let's also talk about, the function of the pineal gland. This is a very physical, mechanical function. Like I spoke about it in esoteric terms, that it is an energy center, that it's the center of your imagination, that it's like a little movie screen that you use to project your imagination on there and then project it into reality. Your pineal gland also produces hormones. It's a gland. Glands produce hormones. So it produces 3 hormones that I'm aware of. DMT, we've spoken about. It also produces melanin and melatonin. And these are interesting chemicals because they are both about our body's response to sunlight. And I have given extensive teachings here in this class all about ingesting sunlight, eating sunlight through your forehead, having a divine co-creative partnership with the sun as a stargate, the sun as a portal to higher consciousness. This is the connection to DMT, that you have within your physical brain this little emanator of consciousness chemicals that puts you in contact with, I would say, the source, but we could say higher reality, because also it must be understood, under the experience of ayahuasca, people sometimes experience interim realms. So that is where you experience a lot of the distortions. Sometimes people experience negative entities. This is important stuff. It is like there is the higher realm, there is the other realm, and then there is the interstice in between the two, where there are often personality characteristics that have not yet been resolved by the universe, and they are happy to interact with you. And so that is also part of the being under a microscope in the mirror and interacting with beings that are in the interstices. I want to do a little bit of redirection to talk about cannabis, but I also just want to bring your attention to a couple of these other drawings. This one, I'm not sure if you can see it. I'm going to make it really big to try to be able to see it. I'm not sure if you can. But this, what I've got over here, this is the pineal gland at the deep center of the brain. And then coming off from there, there are various figures, head first, that are like spokes of a wheel going into that. And this is in order to show that the pineal gland is also the seat of telepathic communication. And when you begin to activate your pineal gland, you will begin to interact with other beings, some of whom live in this time and place along with you, some of whom do not, and all of whom have varying degrees of agenda or friendliness. So this also comes down to who people met when people had their DMT experiences. And if you listen to or watch The Spirit Molecule, people give personal accounts of who and what they met and what they experienced. And there are positive experiences and positive entities, and there were scary entities and negative experiences. And again, this is all about being under a microscope and looking in the mirror, because those beings that one is interacting with are outgrowths of self. They are aspects of self, and we are interacting with portions of ourselves. It's kind of like the right hand meeting the left hand. You know, these are portions of the self, and you are connected through your arms, but you weren't aware of those levels of connection. This drawing, I think you can see a little bit more clearly. And what we have is, this is the pineal gland at the deep center of the head, and you can also see this is the lens that's in front of the face. These are two sensory apparatuses that go out next to the face, almost like horns, you know, those old horns if a person was deaf. These are in order, like satellite dishes, to bring in and tune in to different vibrations, and that this is all centered or nested within this energy field of unconditional love that is emanating from the heart. That's what you see right here, that this is almost like a gimbal, which is a mechanical pivot system that is used for things like, you know, laser guidance or telescopes, that this system pivots on unconditional love. So again, the importance of unconditional love and cultivating that mindset before one begins to ingest DMT or go on these spirit journeys is very important. And then the visions themselves, or the experiences themselves that come when one has ingested the DMT or the ayahuasca, are meant to increase the unconditional love. So first, what is necessary is cultivating unconditional love so that you can get up to that level. And then when you look through that telescope, when you look through your pineal gland and through your third eye, it's like looking through a telescope or looking through a microscope. You can look at and perceive anything you wish. And when you look at the right things, it strengthens your stance of unconditional love. So this would be like saying, I held myself in abeyance. I was neutral about a particular event. Let's say Hurricane Superstorm Sandy from 2 years ago. I was just reading an article about it, and I experienced that when I lived in New York State. First, I don't make a judgment. I just say, okay, that event happened, the storm occurred. Then I raise my energy, and then I open my pineal gland, or I open my third eye, and I connect to a higher consciousness. And I look at the events of Hurricane Sandy from the exalted perspective of higher consciousness. And then I see, the storm had this effect, it came from this cause, and that this is the overall purpose. And when I look at those things, I am able to say, not like, oh, it's a good thing, or oh, it's a bad thing, or oh, these people are good, or these people are bad and wrong. That is not the exalted perspective. The exalted perspective is like when you finish the movie. When when you see everything and it all fits together, and then you say, now it all makes sense. And that information, that informed perspective strengthens the stance of unconditional love, which is of non-judgment. Instead of saying, oh no, a bad thing happened, a storm came and washed away all of my sandcastles and lots of people's houses, instead of going to that emotional reactive place, hold that reaction in neutrality and get to the level of real insight. And real insight is neutral, and it is often abstract. It is often beyond the level of anthropomorphic, human-centered understanding. And when you see the exalted perspective, then you can see, this happened for this reason, and it had this experience, and then this is what happened afterwards. So using something like DMT correctly would give the exalted perspective and allow one to perceive the vagaries of human existence in a different life, the highs and lows of your life in a different way, the people who have hurt you and the lessons you have learned from them in a different way, and to offer forgiveness, and also to offer forgiveness of the self. So this is the value of ingesting DMT before you die. Hey, kind of like this, why not just wait until you die? You're going to get the DMT visions and everything. But the answer is that having that life review when you are still alive means there's still a chance to change your trajectory. When you only get the life review after you have completed your mission here, it's like, oh, I coulda, woulda, shoulda, and wouldn't it have been nice to know that a long time ago, but I didn't know that. So this can give us vital information while we are actually still in the body. And also, it allows us to compare notes. And also, it allows us to say, I went there and came back and I saw this, and someone else goes there and comes back and says, I went there and I came back and I saw this. That is a pretty amazing thing to be able to do. When we get into cannabis is a different type of mechanism in the body. So where DMT is only released at very special times in the experience of a human wearing a human bodysuit, cannabis and cannabinoids are present in the human body throughout the experience. It is not like they're only released at certain times. Cannabinoids are bathing not only the brain and the neurology, but aspects of all of the major organs, digestion, lymph system. The entire body is interwoven or interspersed with these various different types of cannabinoid receptors. Okay, so now I want to get a little bit into the idea of Gaia. Gaia as a physical representation, like a macrocosmic human. So we have certain endogenous brain chemicals, and anything that you have inside of you is also present in the external environment, but it might just be in tiny, tiny quantities because you are living inside of an enormous being. So, if you might have a tiny amount of a particular brain chemical on a tiny neuron, and then you expand that scale to the size of a planetary consciousness, when you find that molecule, it might be diluted. It might be something that exists only in a particular leaf of a particular blue flower, only, in 0.01% concentration at certain times of the year. But it still exists. And this is where many of our pharmaceuticals and drugs are refined chemicals that come from plants. So just doing a little bit of the idea of Gaia as a person, and we'll go more into that for an advanced lesson, that the lungs of the planet are the trees and, the living plants. We can also include algae and other things like that. The blood of the planet is the salt water, which has the same salinity as our blood, and that the plants of the surface of the planet also are like the neurotransmitters, and that is why we find these two chemicals that exist within our own brains exhibited externally on a scale that might be tiny. In order to create the sap to drink, it takes a lot of plant that gets boiled down into a tiny little glass but those chemicals exist. So this is just another way of saying that there is this fascinating interconnection between yourself as an individual and the planet upon which you stand. That you are like a tiny little cell on my hand, and I am like the planet. And of course, everything that is within the totality of the planet is mirrored fractally within that tiny little cell. So, I mean, there's so much here. There's so much here about taboo, and we'll get into that mind state taboo in the next half of this recording. I just have to pause this and save this part, and then we'll get into that. So this is, there we go, saving that, saving that. Give me a moment. Okay. And let me just bring up one more picture as a really simple thing. Here we go. All right. So let me get my recording going. Let's talk about cannabis now, because cannabis is not something that is released by one particular gland in your body in the same way that DMT is released by the pineal gland in the body. There are cannabinoid receptors all throughout the body, and cannabinoids are something that we produce and we also ingest from our environment. So here's a pretty amazing fact. Cannabinoids are present in human breast milk. They are part of what helps a person to begin to repurpose their alimentary tract to begin to digest food. Because, you know, I've been teaching you for a long time that we are actually meant to ingest sunlight, and that our fall from higher consciousness states means that now it is necessary to actually eat physical food that we put into smoothies and actually put into our digestive tract where it is digested by our wonderful gut bacteria, but that it wasn't always that way, and that we will be changing and shifting, and that it won't always be this way. Well, little infants, when they are first born, many do not instinctively eat or feel hungry. It's called latching on, like to get a little baby to actually breastfeed. It sometimes takes coaxing, and that's because the body is not used to putting foreign objects into the mouth and into the stomach and somehow deriving nutrient from that. So breast milk contains cannabinoids, and the cannabinoids create appetite in the infant and stimulate it to actually nurse and stimulate it to actually want to receive nourishment. So now we're getting into a connection between cannabinoids and a receptive state, or being receptive and open to love and affection. Cannabinoids have been part of the human diet for a very long time. So, and when I say cannabinoids, I'll get into this, but not to an uncomfortable degree, because there's a lot of science behind this. But basically, there's a range of chemicals that exist in the cannabis plant. THC is responsible for the psychoactive or euphoric or otherworldly feeling that one might experience when one ingests cannabis. But there's all of these other amazing chemicals in the plant, such as CBD, which is cannabinoid. And these other chemicals, they're not psychoactive in the same way, although they do affect consciousness. They affect a sense of well-being. When one does not have enough of these cannabinoids in the body, one lacks well-being. Now let's go to first of all, there's far distant past, China. The word China literally means the land of hemp. At least 5,000 years ago, the Chinese society is archaeologically known to have been based upon the use of hemp in all aspects. And that is not only for fiber. They grew the plant and used every aspect of it. So they certainly based their rope and their clothing and their sails for their ships, or, you know, whatever they were making with that. They made that out of hemp. They also used the hemp seed for food. It is a perfect protein. They used the hemp seed oil for both food and industrial purposes. And they used the medicine, the resin that one can extract from hemp, for purposes of physical vitality. And that is historical fact. In fact, now I'll go even further, that human society was based, like the agrarian revolution of being able to no longer be a hunter-gatherer roaming around without knowing where your next meal came from. That revolution was based on hemp, that hemp was a tool to be able to quote-unquote civilize humanity. And the tool was given to humanity by extraterrestrial and otherworldly beings. We could look at hemp and agriculture as a type of technology that allowed humans to to progress from their debased state. Because as I have been teaching, in Atlantis, humans lived at a very high, sophisticated level in conjunction with other galactic consciousnesses. When the fall happened, and I'll also get more into this in an advanced lesson, but let me just tell you that the mind control at the height of Atlantis was so severe that you could not even think what you wanted to think. For example, if you wanted to think, pick up that pen, you couldn't think that. Literally, a beam of energy prevented you from being able to do what you wanted to do with your own consciousness. In order to set people free from that level of total mental slavery and usurpation, it was necessary to cut the cords, and that meant a total mind wipe. So people were then picking themselves up from the lowest state of degradation, where no one knew how to do anything. People barely knew how to create a spark to be able to create fire, okay? So from that debased state, hemp and agriculture were used as a type of technology to be able to raise up human consciousness again, all right? Now let's flash forward to the 1940s. You know, in the 1940s, it was not only legal to grow hemp, it was not prohibited, it was considered part of the war effort. Many aspects of conflict and war can be traced back to hemp. This is fascinating, and if you want to research it, I highly recommend the book, The Emperor Has No Clothes. This talks about the War of 1812 and how hemp affected that war. All you need to know is that hemp and the fiber for hemp was used for ropes and sails. And ropes and sails were used for ships, sailing vessels, and in the, let's say 14, 15, 16, 17, and 1800s, that was your military. Those were your big guns. That was how you oppressed others. And that was also commerce related. It was important for commerce. So basically, hemp production was absolutely crucial for expansion of civilization. To build a seagoing vessel and get from point A to point B, it was necessary to grow hemp. I want to redirect the conversation and get a little bit into cannabis, the chemicals, but there's a comment on the board. One type of engine in early automobiles ran on hemp oil. That is beautiful, and I know that some of the early versions of Model T, the actual body of the car was made out of a hemp-derived plastic. It is quite amazing that hemp has been used industrially in the United States, but it's part of a secret history that was whitewashed so that people would not understand that this was an effective, literally, it's an agricultural technology. If people understood how powerful, people are just now coming to understand how powerful this plant is. Not only when it is ingested on an internal biological level, but when it is applied culturally. And when I say that, I mean, if you grow hemp, you can do all sorts of things with it. Beyond make medicine and use the seed for food, you can use the fiber and the stalks for paper. You can use the fiber and the stalks in order to make hempcrete. And this is a carbon sink, which means that it sequesters carbon. It takes it out of the atmosphere and puts it into a solid format. And we could literally rebalance the imbalances in Earth's atmosphere that have been caused by excessive combustion through growing hemp. All right, there's too much CO2 in the atmosphere. Things are out of balance. If we grow hemp, the plants ingest that CO2 and they turn it into solid cellulose. And if we then take that cellulose and we turn it into hempcrete, that carbon is sequestered, and hempcrete can last for hundreds of years if you want. I once read a statistic that said in order to rebalance the imbalance that has been created in Earth's atmosphere due to combustion, what humans have created out of combustion, it would take the formation of a new continent the size of Africa covered entirely by trees. But here's what you don't know. Cannabis is 4 times more effective at sequestering carbon than trees, and it's an annual crop. So now imagine that this is a much more doable project. We could take a lot of the arable land that is currently being used to grow totally crappy, unworthy, genetically modified corn. There's no reason for us to grow corn. The only reason why we grow it is because it has been grandfathered in as part of an old paradigm economy. Nobody really eats a lot of corn. Nobody really wants that much corn. So they grow a lot of corn, but then they have to figure out something to do with it. So they turn it into ethanol and corn syrup. All of that corn area and monoculture, not that I'm espousing monoculture because I know about the bees, but all of that can be replaced by hemp and cannabis, and we can literally radicalize our economy. It is not by accident that hemp and cannabis were oppressed. I'm talking in this class about molecular doorways of consciousness. So DMT is a doorway to higher consciousness, and so is cannabis. Literally, when one ingests it, it puts you in tune with a higher vibration of reality. The systematic reduction of cannabis from the food supply has kept people away from higher consciousness. Literally. So in the 1940s, hemp was grown as part of the war effort. The leaves of hemp were fed to cattle. This is called silage. If you have interest or if you doubt my veracity, I encourage you to do some simple research. But silage was the farm waste that was fed to animals. And we all know this at this point, that what you feed to cows is refined into its milk. And so the cow would then refine all of that. And you know something? There are minute quantities of the psychoactive chemicals and cannabinoids in hemp. If you eat enough of it, it certainly comes out in the milk, and then that certainly is concentrated into butter. Cannabinoids are also found in other aspects of the food supply. They're found in flax and flaxseed oil. They're found in a couple of other plants. Basically, what I am saying to you is that through the, food becoming more processed and through prohibition of growing hemp and having it available, CBDs and cannabinoids have been taken out of the food supply. And I've also established that CBDs give people a sense of well-being. You know, if we talk about back in the good old days, quote unquote, you know, if a person drank milk, they might not think like, wow, I'm having a psychedelic experience, or like, wow, I feel like listening to Jimi Hendrix. It was not like that. It was more a sense of, wow, I now have a natural sense of well-being. And what is happening in the current realm is human well-being is trashed. Like, people do not have that gentle, peaceful sense of like, in this day and age, people do not generally sit by a river and watch the water go by, or sit on the front porch and listen to the crickets. That's not fulfilling to someone. And the reason that I theorize is because most people are always having a sense of inner discomfort and agitation. And things like watching TV or playing on the computer are effective tools to distract oneself from the constant inner discomfort, anxieties, and what we would say is lack of well-being. So first of all, breastfeeding went out of fashion in the 1950s. Many doctors taught their, female patients when they were pregnant that breastfeeding, don't be a cow. That is not sophisticated. Literally, I have heard this from women, that their doctors counseled them not to be like cows. And there was a concerted effort to get people to feed their babies formula. And there's still, there's now a much more powerful movement towards natural childbirth and then breastfeeding if possible. The whole point is breastfeeding gives babies an inner sense of well-being. You give them those cannabinoids from the mother, and that gives babies a good foundation of feeling emotionally relaxed and happy. Then you're a different person than if you're constantly stressed out as a baby and then you grow up to be a constantly stressed out adult. Now I'm so happy to say that there is a movement, towards ingesting cannabis even if one is not ill. So I will tell you all about this. You do not have to have cancer or severe disease in order to benefit from ingesting cannabis, and the best way to do it is to eat it raw. So we're talking about a return to the use of cannabis the way that it was used in China 5,000 years ago and probably even further back, that it was eaten as a dietary staple. And although it's not effective to simply take the leaves and eat them raw like a salad because they have little prickly hairs on them, think about something like nettles. Stinging nettles are incredibly rich in, I want to say human nutrition. They have iron and all of these wonderful phytonutrients. You can't just pick the plant and stick it directly in your mouth. It will sting your mouth. Through human sophistication, you learn that you can put it in boiling water or other, forms to make it palatable and then eat it. So with hemp, it is not effective to just eat it raw like a salad because it has those little tiny hairs on it. They don't sting you, but they would be very uncomfortable to swallow, so it's necessary to grind it up. You can use a blender, you can use a juicer, you can use a food processor, but when you grind it up, it makes this wonderful nutritive paste. So I am a huge proponent of this. It is one of the reasons why I physically relocated to a state where it is legal to grow this plant. I am also a proponent of growing this plant in order to change and radicalize the consciousness of the planet. Dr. Emoto, he just went on his hyperspace voyage, but you might know him from his work with how sound and voice affects water and the formation of water crystals. And before he left this planet, Dr. Emoto spoke all about how we should be planting a lot of hemp. Not only because hemp is a phytoremediator, drawing toxins out of the soils, which can then be, effectively dealt with elsewhere, but also because the vibration of hemp or cannabis itself gives peace. And this is true. If you've ever been in a garden filled with this plant, and you might not ever have had that experience because of prohibition, but I have. Just walking into the energy field of these plants gives a sense of peace and well-being. Just being around them, just smelling them gives uplift. And that's not just my personal association with it. Like, if you like lemons and you smell lemons and you think, oh, that makes you feel happy. Literally, like citrus is uplifting, and that has been shown, biochemically. The terpenes in cannabis have literally, and terpenes are good smelling chemicals, the terpenes have literally been shown to have mood boosting qualities to them. Not necessarily psychoactive qualities. No matter how much cannabis you smell, you won't necessarily have a trip or feel like you need to listen to Jimi Hendrix, but you will feel happier. Your sense of inner well-being will increase. So this has everything to do with controls that were placed on human consciousness and human emotions. Being agitated keeps us in the realm of certain emotions and prevents us from being able to reach certain levels of consciousness that one achieves through inner peace. Think about that. If I keep poking you and keep you agitated, you can't get up there. This is the whole agenda of the beings that I will be speaking about next week in our class. We're finally getting there, guys. We're getting to lesson 18. Noelle has a comment. If we are distracted, we won't notice what we are missing. Totally. And also, if we are distracted, we are less empowered. You can be like the biggest genius or the biggest muscular strongman, but if you are distracted, you cannot apply your strengths, you cannot apply your talents. So a lot of this has to do with blocking humanity from being able to access its higher faculties, and this mindset has even been stated as taboo. Okay, so we can get into this a little bit also, that one is considered, according to the traditional rules of the society in which we live right now, in which we are coming out of, one is considered, quote unquote, a good person if one keeps, it would be defined as a sober mind state, but we could also call it the alert, problem-solving mind state. That being, awake, having your eyes open, and being prepared to be, solve problems and or perform or work for others is considered to be a socially positive mind state. Being sedated, turning inward, meditating, closing your eyes, relaxing, society does not reward any of those mind states. Society also does not reward mind states generally, such as joy and inner fulfillment. In truth, society does not care about whether you're feeling enjoyment or inner fulfillment. Society wants you to shop. Society wants you to procreate in an, not awake manner, in an asleep manner. Society does not really care about your inner personal fulfillment at all. And that's why it is each one of our jobs, or it is necessary to advocate for one's own inner personal fulfillment. But the plot goes way beyond that, because this is really about, there is a higher dimensional reality that humanity has been systematically kept out of and quarantined out of. And in order to get up to those realms, it is necessary to, first of all, do the purge, do the cleansing, do the emotional centering, so that, when you enter into those higher mind states, you present yourself well. And it is not in judgment that I say this, but it's kind of like this. Being down on the surface of the earth and experiencing human culture, it is like you have to be a commando. It is a free-for-all. If you've ever been to a musical concert where there is a mosh pit, it's like a mosh pit. Do you know what I'm talking about? In case you're unfamiliar, in human earth culture, in some music, the band plays at the stage and the audience exists in front of the stage, but there is a maelstrom directly in front of the performers where quote-unquote dancing occurs, which is really people pushing each other in a semi-rhythmic fashion. And that is considered to be part of the experience of the music. Fighting for one's life is considered to be part of the music. Well, right now, human culture is like the mosh pit of really the solar system. It's a free-for-all. There's arms and legs akimbo. Everybody is knocking into everyone else. And I'm talking about energetically, emotionally. When one is born into a family and experiences in infancy, all sorts of different unpleasantness, all sorts of things. People are mean and hurt your feelings. Even that's not abuse. Like, that's just normal life. Like, older siblings are mean and make fun of you. Kids at school are mean. Like, parents and teachers don't understand. Society is mean. Like, that's just normal. And this gives, an experience. It like colors your palette. And it is necessary to have like a cleansing before you go into the higher dimensional chat room. Because if you come out of the mosh pit and you're all like totally sweaty and bedraggled and like you've just been in a fight for your life, and then you burst through the door like I'm here. It's like, something. It is necessary to cleanse of all of that stuff. And we are also cleansing as preparation for, interacting with galactic otherworldly beings, that we are exiting the mosh pit of the past 2,000 years of human history. And when I say cleansing, let's say like you get to take a breather. You get to close the chapter on what you were doing before and change the emotional tone of what you will be experiencing. So the changes in cannabis laws are a huge part of that. I will tell you that this is part of a revolution on the surface of the planet. It is part of a revolution of consciousness. It's part of flying rainbow lasagna, I am oh so very happy to say. Not only making the plant more accessible to people, but making it so that when you ingest it, you do not emit fear. Because cannabis pretty much amplifies your imagination. It has a lot of impact on the biological systems, and in the recorded lesson of lesson 17, I talk all about that, like what it does to the physical biology. But I'd like to speak a little bit about what it does to the imagination. Whatever you've got inside, it turns it up. That is what I will say. Cannabis does not give you anything that you do not already have or make you anything that you are not already. It turns up the volume on what you already are. So that means if you're like a system that's got leaky pipes and we put a lot more water into your system, it just means that your pipes are going to leak extra. And if those leaky pipes are aspects of anxiety or doubt or negativity, then putting cannabis into the system just means let's think about those things even more. So it's very important to use the substance effectively. When you ingest cannabis, I like to say that you are in front of the microphone of the universe. You know, when I come here and record my class, I am infinitely aware that I am speaking in front of a microphone, and I try not to, you know, hem, haw, burble, bobble, and, you know, say a bunch of stupid, foolish things. I'm quite aware that people are listening. Well, guess what? You know, first of all the time you are connected to the sea of consciousness. You are not just swimming around in your own private kiddie pool. But when you ingest cannabis, it makes your voice even louder. Whatever you're thinking, whatever you have going on internally is now being projected even louder, even stronger, to an even greater degree. So one must be even more impeccable. Instead of saying, like some people say, I cannot ingest that substance, it gives me a bad trip, or it makes me feel bad, or whatever. Probably what happens is when they ingest cannabis, they begin to focus on their problems and negativities, and it's very important to have solutions if those things come up. So if negative thoughts or fears come up, it's important to be able to say, I have a solution for that, or how not to put energy into what you don't want and put energy into what you do want. So the brief 1-minute lesson on how to ingest cannabis is, it doesn't matter how you ingest it, but after you have taken it, recognize that you have a wonderful opportunity to manifest what you wish to manifest, and to say the things that you wish for the universe to hear. So if you say things like, I'm no good, I'll never succeed, the universe is listening and will hear that. If you say something like, I wish for greater opportunities, the universe hears that. If you say things like, I deserve greater opportunities, or check out how great I am at my artwork, music, poetry, healing, and general exploration of life, when you speak and present yourself in that way, then the universe also responds quite a lot. In the recorded lesson 17, I talk about the endocannabinoid system and its effect on healing. And I also want to talk a little bit about multidimensionality, because a lot of the limitations in people's present viewpoints has to do with how science has programmed humans. Science has programmed humans to believe that your neurology is a linear circuit. An impulse starts out here in your brain and travels all the way down your whole arm and goes to the end of your fingertip, and then has to travel all the way back your whole arm, all the way back up to your brain. And that's because science has been doing research on humans who have had underdeveloped endocannabinoid systems, or not enough cannabinoids in their system, and has designated that as quote unquote normal. That is not normal. That actually, and this has to do with the way that nerves are structured, I'm making a little room so you can see back here, but if you say that this is the end of a nerve and this is the other end of a nerve, all right? And this red area in here, this is the synaptic gap. That's where the little blue impulse, the little blue nerve impulse, has to jump across that gap, okay? So let's say that the blue nerve impulse is a pain impulse. Ow, 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 and I'm jumping across the gap, and ow, 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 ow. So the way that cannabis prevents the constant flow of pain signals is by saying, here, when we have little cannabinoid molecules here, and this pain impulse is traveling here, and it gets to the end of this nerve, and it wants to jump into this nerve, but it can't, because it's already filled up with those green little cannabinoid symbols. These little green molecules, they temporarily make it so that it's like, oops, not accepting any new room at the inn. No new signals for a few minutes, no new signals for a moment. That is key. That is crucial. That is the mechanism that prevents seizures, spasticity, excessive nerve pain, neuropathy, a lot of the problems that come from diseases like multiple sclerosis, where you simply have too much firing of nerves or uncontrolled firing of nerves. All of that is mitigated by the endocannabinoid system. This is huge. This is like, I'm basically telling you that in large part, the maladies that one experiences in this current time and place have to do with an absence of dietary cannabis. And you don't have to be exhibiting symptoms and say, oh, I'm so poor and decrepit, I have to go eat some cannabis. We should all be eating this as a proactive and preventive solution, especially in light of Fukushima. I know I'm getting to the end of my recording, but I have a little bit more to talk about this, and then we can all, talk about experiences, and maybe I'll end the screen recording. But because of Fukushima and the increased presence of radiation in the planet and on the food supply, I am simply telling you, like Dr. Aurora prescribes, cannabis juice for everyone. This is essential for human culture to survive. This is not hyperbole. This is fact. The slow motion, epic, ecological disaster of Fukushima means that ingesting raw cannabis juice is a mandatory, not optional, compensatory behavior. And please elect me for Queen of the World, because I would mandate that we all had to grow cannabis. In the same way that they said, we all have to grow cannabis for the war effort, in order to help us against, the evil beings of World War II. I would say every amount of the commons, the open space of any place, and everybody's individual. And here, let me turn this off so that I'm not so much in the shadows. I know it's always looks so shadowy. So that not only do we need to cover the surface of the planet with this plant in order to help the planetary consciousness, okay? Plants represent neurotransmitters of the planet. The more cannabis we grow on the surface of the planet, it's like the more cannabis is in Gaia. Gaia needs well-being. The planet herself has experienced incredible traumatic degradation. And just like anyone, they're now finding that cannabis is a very effective treatment for soldiers with PTSD or people who have been traumatized. And cannabis helps and can help our planetary consciousness. That's part of it. So also, in order to effectively be able to juice the leaves, it takes a lot of leaves in order to make a little tiny bit of juice. It's the same thing with spinach or parsley or anything that you need to juice. This plant needs to be grown in large fields so that we have enough to juice it so that everyone can have access to it. And also, it should not be just access for the elite. I would not want that, and I want to say I will not allow that. It's always been that way. Wealthy people can afford to have organic food, and that the downtrodden have to eat food that is covered with pesticides. This is no longer this way. So the way that this should work out, cannabis should be grown and cultivated and wildcrafted, and you should be able to go out and just pick from big giant bushes of it and bring it inside and juice it and eat it for your health. It should be considered a human right, specifically because of Fukushima. And part of it is going to require humans advocating for themselves, because although there's prohibition, which said you're not allowed to grow this plant. Now they're giving laws that say, well, you're allowed to grow this plant, but only this many, or only in these certain circumstances, or in some states, they're saying you're not allowed to grow it at all. Only an official dispensary can grow it, and then you can buy it from the dispensary. None of that is going to work, because that is more elitism. And we're literally talking about a life-saving chemical here. This is not like Ebola is coming and you're going to have to get your vaccine to save your life. That is not what this is about. Fukushima is here, and it is ongoing, and in order to redeem Earth culture and life during this experience, it is necessary to ingest raw cannabis. And I do not want to appear to be a doomsayer. Far from it. I am a realist, telling you real facts and then offering an effective solution. So I'm not a fear monger. I'm not saying be afraid, run in fear. I'm saying focus that there is this real crisis, and here is the solution. And now it is up to us. We need to work together. So what are the things that can be done? Okay, I don't know what states each person particularly lives in, but signing petitions and working with your particular legislature. patient's rights to grow, and eventually it should be, you shouldn't have to be a patient to grow it, but that is a very good beginning, opening the door, opening the step, and everything like that. Okay. I know I just yacked a lot and spoke a lot. I would like to open the floor to any questions or comments, or if you'd like me to pause the screen recording, then anybody who has, anything that they'd like to say about experiences with DMT or cannabis that they might want to talk about, or questions they might have of me. I'm happy to speak openly. I live in California, where I am a medical patient and I'm allowed to have and ingest cannabis as much as I like. Noel says, I recently signed one here in Nevada to allow legal marijuana. We are in the process of getting medical marijuana here now. Yes, it's good. There is legislation that's happening all over, and that's very effective. There's some good organizations that are, working with this. NORML, Normal, is very good. Sorry, the other ones are escaping my brain right at the moment, but there's some good petitions that can be signed. And something else? Having conscious conversations changes reality. So I speak about raw cannabis juice with a lot of people. It's surprising. So even though I'm in California, not everyone is open to speaking about this. I was at the health food store, and a person who was, checking me out at the, where you pay, he said, oh, what are your plans this weekend? Because I think he saw some of the treats that I was buying. And I said, well, I am going to go to a garden, a medical grow, and pick all sorts of wonderful organic cannabis leaves and juice it along with carrots and beets and parsley and, lemons and oranges into some wonderful juice. And that brought up a beautiful conversation with this person about the shamanistic uses of cannabis and about using it for healing. And this is the way. Our voices are powerful, and we send out these reverberations into the universe. Mike has a suggestion here. This is, someone could make a document to speak out loud, like the soul contract done by Galactic Historian. I love that, and I would like that type of contract to be a contract about the right to grow and ingest whatever we wish as part of personal sovereignty. You know something? If a person wanted to grow or cultivate their own psilocybe cubensis mushrooms, the magic mushrooms, they should be able to. Just like if you want to grow carrots or if you want to grow shiitake mushrooms, you should be able to. There's no one else should be allowed to come in and dictate what you can and cannot put into your body. And certainly if you wanted to tie someone else down and force them to eat, mushroom soup made of shiitake and psilocybe cubensis, that would be inappropriate because that's against free will. But it is equally as inappropriate for someone to take away your free will for what you would like to ingest. And I think I said I was going to talk a little bit about the mental mind state, that this culture has made it a taboo to be in that undefined, blissful, numinous mind state that most infants and children have naturally, where you're not really aware of time. You go from activity to activity. Often it's about creative expression. That ingesting cannabis often is the tool to bring adults out of that hardened or calcified mind state, being aware of time, being scheduled, being responsible, being alert and problem solving, and allows one's consciousness to soften and go into a more receptive state, a more dreamlike state. Technically, cannabis is not a narcotic, and it really bugs me when it is called the Narcotics Agency is enforcing, the drug laws, and, signs say no narcotics allowed. But my friends, please, smoke all the cannabis you want because it's not a narcotic. The definition narcotic means that it comes from poppy and makes a person sleepy. Technically, cannabis is a hypnotic. Mike's comment is that they are afraid of it. It is very true. It is true. Cannabis is a threat to the status quo. This is why cannabis was demonized and systematically eradicated. It used to grow wild in the American Midwest. was literally systematically eradicated. And that's why I foresee and I promote basically wild crafting. It's a very hardy plant that can revert back to its natural state. And just like kudzu, you'll see it all growing wild all over. There was another comment down here. Noel says, you can't be a cog in the wheel of industry if you are truly aware and connected. That's another huge part of it. This has to do with personal empowerment. You can get away from having to be a slave to the pharmaceutical industry by growing a plant. Or I have been able to do this. I used to literally have to be tied to a pharmaceutical company and pay them $888 a month, or have a health insurance plan that would cover the medication that I needed. And now I don't have to do that. Now all I have to do is grow a plant in my backyard or make friends with someone who grows a plant, and then I can either smoke or create a tincture or create food, or I've experimented with all sorts of different things. So yeah, I grow a high CBD variety of cannabis, and I use that along with a lot of other, I use THC also in order to control seizures. And so I do not have to take the pharmaceuticals anymore. And I've seen wonderful personal stories of people who have been able to become empowered and no longer be tied to an industry that has no desire to make people well, but just wants to have continual patience so that you have to keep on buying their stuff. And it is a much more, I think, positive way of managing dis-ease, or what is not at ease in the body. Basically to say that I am instead of trying to fight disease, what I am trying to do is nourish health. That I ingest cannabis, especially raw dietary cannabis, as a way of improving overall health and vitality. There's a comment down here from Noel. Oops. Not sure if I missed a little thing. Yes, that cannabis is very effective with HIV and AIDS. It is. It's effective with viral problems. It's effective with digestive problems. If we go into Crohn's disease and a lot of the intestinal problems that people have, all of that is from lack of endogenous cannabinoids. Mike has a question. Is there a book that talks about the effects of cannabis? I don't have a good book to be able to recommend. I have a website and a doctor, Dr. William Courtney. He's located here in California, and I have gotten products through the Humboldt Patient Resource Center, which is in Arcata. And Dr. Courtney used to teach a juicing protocol through the Humboldt Patient Resource Center. But due to lack of availability of unsprayed leaves, so this is part of the education that I'm doing here. There's a lot of people in Humboldt who grow cannabis, but a lot of them either use not organic fertilizers, or they spray their leaves with either a fertilizer or a pesticide. And in order to make juice out of it, they have to be organically grown and sprayed only with something that is a food grade pesticide or insecticide. So to give an example, my friend, to get rid of any bugs, sprays starchy potato water on her leaves. All right, the potato water clogs up the skin of the bugs and they suffocate and die. Then if you want to juice the leaves, you just wash off the leaves and the starch comes right off. These are the type of farming practices that I am learning and teaching to others, and that is the future. That is what we will be experiencing. So and I speak about this because our voices have power. We will soon be experiencing a world where there is uncultivated, weedy hemp that you can walk out onto the side of the highway and just pick it, and there will also be much more highly cultivated fields of hemp intentionally created for this, and medical grade cannabis that is grown by people with the right intention. And this food will be available to humanity as part of reculturating humans. Noel asks, would hemp oil work as an insecticide also? It's possible that it might. I know people who use neem oil instead you dilute a little bit of neem oil into a sprayer, and that has it repels insects and it kills whatever insects are there. And I'm not sure if it has to do with the smell of the neem or just the action of any oil being that kind of to clog things up. So you know what, I'm going to actually end the screen record for this, but I'm not ending our class, I'm just ending it so that in case there's any comments that wish to be made that don't wish to be made actually on camera. And before I do this real fast, next week is galactic history. So next week is lesson 18 and is going to be a big long discussion, and I certainly hope that